Crane and the Cowboy, we were talking in our last broadcast with you about how negative the media has been going on these two candidates. And here it is again. I mean, the last 2 weeks we had this gentleman who spoke at the Democratic Convention, Mr. Khan, who lost a son. And he went after Donald Trump for going after the war and all sorts of other things. And that went for about a week or so. Now we have Donald Trump making an off-the-cuff remark about the Second Amendment, which some people extrapolated into a threat.
Donald Trump is finding out what happened to Barry Goldwater in 1964. They are just piling on, and they want to beat him into the ground so there's nothing recognizable. And it's kind of sad, actually. I mean, back in the '64 campaign, Howard K. Smith, the renowned broadcaster, who actually got his start, with Edward R. Murrow, after it's all over, he walks up to Goldwater at some event and says, "Yeah, I guess we were totally biased against you." Well, thanks a lot. They also, if you look at the stories about his mental health and everything else, the New York Times in 1964 put out a piece. They had 10 psychiatrists who went on the record saying he's a nut.
But never examined him.
And then they were examining him.
Right.
I mean, that's, so great. If what do you look across the room and say, he has cancer? This is ridiculous. So he's taken the full brunt of it. But, if he weathers this little bit, if they throw everything they can and they're still pretty tight, and it's still pretty tight, they're going to be running out of ammunition come September.
Well, we have been saying, if not on camera to you, to ourselves, that we knew that the New York Times, the Washington Post, the networks were going to be gunning for Donald Trump. We knew that. Just because he was different, he doesn't have experience, he's a showman, call him a blowhard, whatever you want to call him, and they're naturally in bed with the Democratic Party. But the funny thing, history reveals that Barry Goldwater's policies were not all that different from Jack Kennedy's. Maybe Lyndon Johnson, but not Jack Kennedy. It was only a year apart from the time that Kennedy was assassinated to the election.
Yeah, and also, Barry Goldwater and Jack Kennedy were good friends.
Yeah.
And they had already planned that they were going to run together, and they planned on doing Lincoln-Douglas-style debates. So that, could have been a positive for the country. But I like when you say the media is gunning for Donald Trump. We're going to have to change the word because, first of all, they don't know anything about guns, and they don't want to touch them. So we better use another word.
Well,
going after.
Thinking about this, though, and I was in the media for a long time at a network, and I remember the old days when, okay, you would take a candidate's, his views or her views on a different issue, you'd do them side by side and let the voters decide, and maybe you'd have an editorial. But this is like character assassination, and it's on both sides because Fox News is going after Hillary as hard as the rest of the media is going after Trump.
The difference is, here's Fox, and here's the rest of them.
Yeah.
And they are, in fact, I think they're almost gleefully enjoying it. And quite frankly, nowadays, we ought to go back to the old days of the New York Times when nobody had a byline. Because now everybody with the bylines out there, they're all opinion pieces. These aren't news stories. This isn't the who, what, why, when, where. These people didn't go work like you did it in the early days, finding out those things and being a good old-fashioned gumshoe reporter. These guys nowadays, they're frivolous, they're TV stars, and, hell, they're on Sharknado, for God's sakes.
And the problem is that so much of it is digital now. At least back in the day, you could use the Washington Post and the New York Times to wrap the fish guts or pick up after your dog.
Yeah.
But not anymore.
At least there was something to do with it. Yeah, nowadays you got to just put it in the recycler.
Well, we urge you to read all sorts of sources and try and get all of the facts you can before you make a decision, because usually the media is wrong, trust me. Crane and the Cowboy, see you again.